For my rabbinic ordination ceremony, which was now 15 years ago this past May, we were asked to share a line of Jewish text that would be printed along with our headshots and a little bio on a pamphlet that all the guests received. One line to encapsulate our entire rabbinate. So you can imagine, folks chose lines like, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice you will pursue, or love your neighbor as yourself, or slightly more obscure lines like we might come across in our davening today. In Yizkor, for example, teach us to number our days so that we might attain a heart of wisdom, know before whom you stand, and so forth. I chose a line from Psalm 100. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, bo lefanav birnana. Serve the Holy One with joy. Come before God with jubilation. Wow, we're so surprised, said no one. You can make a good case for Judaism being about a lot of things. It's an ancient tradition famous for multiple answers to every question, and it is about all of those things and more. It is about justice. It is about holiness. It is about oneness and love and awe and wisdom and learning. And for all these reasons and more, do I love this tradition with all my heart and mind and soul. But today, I want to lift up joy, simcha. Partially because joy is in short supply these days. You heard me talk on Rosh Hashanah about heartbreak, which I feel is basically a feature of all of our emotional landscapes in some form or fashion. Over this past year, I've heard people say things like, I don't even know how to be happy anymore, or what right do I have to feel joy, to be happy with X or Y or Z happening? And I get it, right? What right do I have to feel joy while the safeguards protecting our democracy are being dismantled, or while the climate catastrophe rages on unabated, or while masked ICE agents are kidnapping people off the streets of Chicago, even in this moment? Not dissimilar to what my grandmother endured in Germany in the 1930s. How can I be happy while there's even one hostage still in Gaza, or Palestinians in Gaza are being starved and bombed? How can I feel joy when it's possible we're just 2 years away from the artificial intelligence singularity? When machines take over planet Earth? That's a relatively new one for me. Isn't it nice to have a growing list of things to feel anxious about? How can I do anything other than weep? How can I do anything other than sit on my floor in fetal position? And today, and today is Yom Kippur, right? A day for sacred accountability, a day for looking unflinchingly at the ways that I have contributed to all of that harm and more closer to home, right? My lack of patience or curiosity. How even though I never want to yell at my kids, I always end up yelling at my kids. How on this space, I should be considering atonement and repair, what that looks like, and that's really serious, actually. So why do I want to talk about joy? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said about 2,000 years ago, in the first book of Jewish law, the Mishnah, one of the two most joyful days on the Jewish calendar is Yom Kippur. So for 2,000 years, this day has been about joy. Why didn't anyone tell all of our childhood synagogues? But actually, how do you reconcile the austerity that we practice on this day with joy? It's a reasonable question. So let's do some back-of-the-napkin math, like the rabbis who wrote that Mishnah. If we celebrate the Exodus from Egypt in the spring, and 3 months later, the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, which we celebrate at Shavuot, right on the cusp of summer, and 40 days later, the Israelites commit the ultimate sin, worshiping the golden calf, for which Moses breaks the tablets and then needs to go back up the mountain for another 40 days. Then, when he comes down with the new set, it would have been right around now. And indeed, our tradition asserts that Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the second set of tablets that he had himself inscribed, his face radiant, and the Israelites were given, on that day, a second chance. And so this day represents God's capacious forgiveness and a second chance for all of us, no matter what we may have done. The idea that with real repentance, real tshuva, we can come back from even the worst betrayal of ourselves and each other. We can both forgive and be forgiven. And that is a source of immense joy and relief and hope. So we began the holiday last night with the words, Vayomer Adonai salachti ki dvarecha, right? And God said, I forgive them, just like you wanted. And, interestingly, the forgiveness in that case wasn't even about the golden calf thing. It was about a different episode later in the book of Numbers. I don't need to go into it. The point is the Israelites were constantly disappointing God and Moses and in constant need of forgiveness. In fact, the entire story of the Torah is creation, sin, regret, repair, forgiveness. Creation, sin, regret, repair, forgiveness, rinse, repeat. It's the story of what it means to be human. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav was known to say, if you see that it can be broken, believe that it must be able to be repaired. So in my mere 15 years of being a rabbi, I have to say, I never cease to be astounded by how radical and important that foundational Jewish idea is, that we can evolve, that we can change, that we each have a role to play in the tikkun and the healing of our world. I've seen it actually change people's lives. Anyone who's ever hurt a friend, a partner, as I have, as we all have, or who's gone through the fourth step in AA, the fearless moral inventory, and then had the hard conversations afterwards with the person or people we've hurt, that has opened up the space for honesty, and then for the possibility of a fresh start. Anyone who's done that knows how powerful and cathartic this can be, and it is a deep source of joy. So yes, I want to talk about joy on Yom Kippur. And I also want to draw out the distinction between joy, as I'm talking about it, simcha, and something like happiness. Happiness is, to quote the cast of characters from You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, happiness is finding a pencil, 2 kinds of ice cream, climbing a tree. There are a lot more that they include there. I feel like the grown-up version of that in 2025 is like, happiness is running a 5K, a new season of Only Murders in the Building, watching Colbert, or like you can fill in your favorite 4-syllable delight, Ben and Jerry's, The Daily Show, John Oliver. Wait, do you have one? 4-syllable, Wordle and Strands. What? Sourdough bread. All right, you get it. In other words, this kind of happiness is like the delightful little moments that punctuate our lives with glee and have nothing to do with religion or spirituality per se, and you don't even necessarily have to work hard at it. You just get to enjoy it. Eating a bite of chocolate cake that you didn't even have to make, or your morning coffee. There's nothing wrong with any of that. I'm not here to knock it. We need that in our lives. But it's not simcha. It's not joy. Not the way our tradition understands it in the religious sense of the word. To understand simcha, I want to pull out a book. It says, This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared by Rabbi Alan Liu. It's a spiritual roadmap through the season of transformation that is the high holidays. Great book, highly recommend, if you haven't heard me say that every year for the past decade. And now I'm going to spoil it for you. Like Yom Kippur itself, the book ends with joy. The culmination of this whole intense high holiday season, if we do it right, is joy. Not happiness, but simcha. So while happiness always feels joyful, joy or simcha does not always feel like happiness or fun, exactly. And a key to understanding how that can be is precisely what we are doing here right now on one of the two most joyful days of the year. What time is it? 1:51? So like 17 hours into a 25-hour fast. This is inui nefesh, this fasting, self-affliction. It is a feeling of discomfort that is built into Yom Kippur on a conceptual level, on a cerebral level, to help us reckon with our non-existence in the world, with the possibility of our non-existence in the world, the confrontation with our death, as I talked about last night. But forget that for a second. On a purely physical level, we feel our bodies in a way that we are not used to, and we do not like. We are hungry. We feel thirsty. We might feel kind of exposed and vulnerable and irritable. We're used to covering over, medicating, and masking these feelings in general and discomfort in general. But today, we feel it. We feel all of it. Or like we are invited to feel all of it by stripping away the usual defenses, food, makeup, nice clothes, not working. And so we could be really, really present and feel the discomfort in our bodies. It actually helps us become more present, not in a way that feels good, but in a way that feels present. It's hard to be thinking about anything else when your tummy is rumbling. And if we do this right, we'll feel ourselves go from baseline last night, like our baseline mood, how we tend to just show up places, baseline level of anxiety, whatever that is for you. We'll feel ourselves go from there to sort of settling in, getting comfortable with this day that we're in. We might hit some lows. We'll hit some highs. We will feel impulses and desires arise and then fall away. We'll realize how temporary every feeling is if we just let ourselves feel it in its fullness and then let it pass. And after we've gone on this journey of cracking ourselves open in this way, we will return to our everyday lives, but I think it happens at a slightly higher baseline that is informed by this deep spiritual, sustained attention of this day. And so that combination of physical and emotional and spiritual attention and presence, that has a word in Hebrew, simcha, joy. You can't feel it while being distracted, while scrolling, while multitasking. And you're much more likely to feel it in a group. It can even be ecstatic, even in our discomfort. And it can feel like a lot of things. You might say the spiritual technology of the entire high holiday season that we are in right now is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And developing more comfort with discomfort seems like a pretty important spiritual practice for the world that we are living in, does it not? So I just kind of want to paint the picture of the journey a little bit. The high holidays began not 10 days ago with the joyful noise of Rosh Hashanah, but actually 7 weeks earlier with the holiday of Tisha B'Av, which we observe with another 25-hour fast, just like Yom Kippur, except instead of having an atmosphere of joy and hope and potential, it has an atmosphere of despondency and hopelessness, the opposite end of the emotional spectrum, both because of the historical events it commemorates, but also because of the despair at seeing all the ways that we human beings have not changed one iota since the Babylonian and Roman empires. With their brutal displays of might and power and the havoc that wreaks on everyday people. And so we sit on the floor and we weep for our world. That's a Jewish holiday. But there's only one day like that. Because at the end of that day, we get up off the floor, and then it is 7 weeks that lead into the new year. And 3 weeks in, we begin to hear the sound of the shofar every day, to do even more serious introspection, so that when we show up at Rosh Hashanah and imagine ourselves passing before the Holy One, like a sheep passes before a shepherd to be inspected, when we hear the sound of the shofar 100 times in all of its pathos and grandeur, we are present for it. in mind and body and spirit. Forget for a moment everything I said last week about Abraham failing his tests. One test he repeatedly aces is that he shows up. He shows up. He says, Hineni. That's like Abraham's line. Hineni, I am ready. I am here. I am present. What is the world asking of me today? That's the invitation of Rosh Hashanah, to become radically present in your own life. A birthday for each one of us to wake up to our life. And then there's this sacred 10-day window in between that birthday and this, the day we get to read our own obituary. Rabbi Lou calls this period a kfitzat haderech, a shortening of the way, a collapsing of the totality of our lives into a window short enough to really look at. To ask ourselves if the way that we are living is in fact the way that we want to live and the way that we want to be remembered. And if not, to let this day be the kick in the pants that each one of us needs so that we don't have to wait for a diagnosis or a tragedy to strike, to look at our life and then take it by the reins. Right? These moments of insight, of clarity, aha, that stop you in your tracks and take your breath away, that's religious joy. That's simcha. There's a story about a Hasidic Rebbe who was born in Germany and trained in Austria and emigrated to the United States, fleeing the Nazis. He watched in horror from America as much of his family and whole Hasidic dynasties were wiped out in the Holocaust. And yet after the war, for decades, he would travel back to Europe, including to Germany and Austria, to sing and to teach Torah. And inevitably, people would ask him, how can you go back there? How can you go back there after what they did to you and your family? Don't you hate them? And to anyone who asked that question, he would respond, I have only one soul. If I had two souls, I would gladly devote one of them to hating the Germans full time. But I have only one soul, and I'm not going to waste it on hating. We have one soul. To quote our beloved Celia Strauss, life is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. Who will live and who will die? We don't know. But we get one soul. And with it, we can give in to anger and hatred and resentment and nursing our victimhood, holding onto a hot coal, imagining how one day we're going to throw it at that person, we're going to teach a lesson to them, and all the while it is just burning a hole in our hand and burning a deep, deep stain on our soul, on our one precious soul. Joy looks like feeling all that rage and then deciding in a knowing moment to put down the coal. Joy is the full body feeling of hunger and thirst and the catharsis of that first bite of food at the end of the fast, the realization that you have been written into the book of life, for now at least, and that you get to choose what to do next. How to speak to your children, your spouse, your parents, how to move through life with greater attention and patience and curiosity and forgiveness, how not to miss an opportunity to dance or sing or protest or volunteer or make a Shiva minyan. That is all simcha. This training in full body presence culminates, as Rabbi Stephen said earlier, 5 days from now when we go outside and we sit in a temporary hut called a sukkah, with neither a finished roof nor finished walls, and we feel the elements on our skin. The Torah says, you will rejoice in your festival. Your children, your servants, the Levite, which is to say the person who doesn't have any land of their own, the stranger and the orphan, and you will hold a festival for your God for 7 days, and you will have nothing but joy. V'samachta b'chagecha v'hayita ach sameach. Full, complete, full body presence, joy. This commandment of dwelling in the sukkah and shaking the lulav and etrog in all the 6 directions, honoring the ancestors, the elements of the earth and wind and fire and spirit and God all around. Critically, you cannot do these things without a body. You can't think a lulav into shaking. You can't think your way into a sukkah. All the Jewish holidays are marked with the observance of joy. You know, it's why you say Chag Sameach on the Jewish holidays, happy holidays. But there is an extra measure of joy connected to Sukkot. That's why we call it Zman Simchatenu, the time of our joy. That's how it's referred to in all the prayers. And Rabbi Lou writes about this. Why should it be that Sukkot is like extra joy? And he says, maybe this special joy is the joy of having been stripped naked, the joy of being flush with life, the joy of having nothing between our skin and the wind and the starlight, nothing between us and the world. We've spent the last many weeks acknowledging our brokenness, allowing ourselves to see what we don't usually look at, embracing the emptiness at the core of our experience, reducing our lives to a series of impulses that rise up and fall away like a breath. We've even let our denial of death slip a little. And so we sit in a house that calls attention to the fact that it gives us no real shelter. It's not really a house. It's a parody of a house. And it exposes the idea of a house as an illusion. The idea of a house is that it gives us security, shelter, haven from the storm. But no house, no building of wood and stone can ever offer us protection from the disorder lurking all around us. And we know this. We never really believed in this illusion. So in the sukkah, a house that freely acknowledges it can't be the basis of our security, we let go of this need to control everything, to feel safe in all moments. And suddenly we feel our life, following our life, doing its dance, one step after another. And he writes, this joy is not fun. It is a deep release of the soul. And it includes death and pain. Joy is any feeling fully felt, any experience we give our whole being to. Joy, a friend shared with me recently, is the matriarch of a family of emotions who won't show up to dinner unless all her children are welcome in the house. Jealousy, rage, grief, despair, anger, embarrassment, real simcha makes room for everything. And the result is honesty. It's a deep connection to the self, to others, to God. And when I say God, in this case, I don't actually mean the character of God that I often refer to, but the life force sustaining and bolstering us even in the presence of so much suffering. That's simcha. That's joy. And you know, we share this practice with so many other groups who have known suffering and oppression. Our queer brothers and sisters, Black writers and thinkers, and so many more who have insisted and continue to insist that our collective redemption requires joy. Joy is not a luxury. It's an imperative. Like Miriam the prophet, leaving everything behind to cross into the darkness and go across the Red Sea, not knowing if the Israelites would make it, but bringing one thing. Her tambourine. Of course we can feel grief at the world as it is. There is much to grieve, but when we envision the future we want to build, I want that future to include joy. And we can't build a future with joy if we don't create and protect and nurture spaces for full-body, holistic, joyful Jewish presence for joy right now. When I decided to become a rabbi, my hope was that my contribution, my tikkun, could be to help give Jews a reason to give Judaism a second chance. I realized that so many people had given up on our tradition because they'd never experienced it that way. They never knew that our tradition wants to be a space for us in all of our messiness. And I felt like I could play a role in helping people experience Judaism that way. That's why Mishkan is a space for serving God with joy. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. However you understand God and whatever joy looks like for you right now. Because we do God and the world no favors by being mopey and cynical and sourpusses, complaining about the way things are from the comfort of our couch. Of course, we do need spaces to do that, like therapy and with friends, where we can express those things. And those are not actually what will power the revolution we need, whether it is a revolution of kindness or sustainability or justice or radical imagination or simply honoring the humanity in one another or all of the above. We need to see each other in our fullness, to believe in the best in ourselves and each other, and to say hineni for one another, to show up with our whole, full, imperfect, in-process selves. And only in spaces that allow for that kind of fullness is simcha really possible. So I just want to pray that you are inscribed for a life of health and simcha in this year to come. And I look forward to laughing and crying and singing and dancing with you all here in this space, come what may, in this year to come. And now I want to sing. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha